shortly before I began my time here at Cabrini, I did an 8-week study period just outside of Jerusalem at a place called Tantur. It's run by the University of Notre Dame. They run a program for us old guys to kind of get rejuvenated. So I went there at the end of January and got there a couple days early. Got to Tantur and found my room, and from my room I could look out onto Bethlehem. Or at least I could look out onto the wall that Israel has built between Palestine and Israel. So it's about a 25-foot concrete wall. Makes it look like a prison. So I looked out on that from my room, crossed a field that had all kinds of wonderful little flowers and olive trees and other kind of native Israel stuff. So that first Sunday, I was there early. The program was starting Monday. I hadn't been given any guidelines, but I knew I needed to go to Mass. So I headed out to go to Mass in Bethlehem. I walked across the field and I saw the cars going into Bethlehem, heading up to the checkpoint that the Israelis have. There were guys there with machine guns, all dressed up to make sure that they were controlling who was going in and out. And I started walking toward the checkpoint. And a black Mercedes pulled up next to me and the window rolled down. And the guy inside said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Nope, I'm fine." "Where are you going?" "I'm going up to Mass in Bethlehem. Let me give you a ride." "That's all right, I can walk. It's only about a mile. Bethlehem's not very big. Let me give you a ride." I think, I don't know this guy. Maybe he's a terrorist or something. I think he's got a black Mercedes. The guy, I'm not sure if this is. And he said, "No, please, let me take you there. I'll just take you there." And I thought, all right, nobody's ever going to hear from me again. Opened the door and got in and sat down, and we proceeded up to the checkpoint. And he said, "Why were you walking here?" And I said, "Well, I'm at Tantur, and I want to go up to Mass." And he was familiar with Tantur. And he said, "Oh, well, let me teach you your first thing. This is a checkpoint for cars. The walk-in checkpoint's about 2 blocks down on the other opening in the wall." He said, "They might have shot you, actually, as you were walking up to it, because you're not supposed to walk up to this place. They might have thought you were a terrorist." I'm thinking, me? I thought you were a terrorist. He was a driver who was both an Israeli citizen and a Palestinian, and so he took people back and forth all the time. He was just doing me a favor. So I went to Mass, and I had a cup of coffee afterwards at Stars and Bucks Cafe. I got one of their mugs so you can see it. Not Starbucks, Stars and Bucks, which fits in Bethlehem. There were stars. I don't know what the bucks were, but they're hoping to make some bucks. For 8 weeks, I looked at that wall. Every time I went to my room, that's what I looked at. Out the windows, over the balcony, was a big wall. That wall became for me kind of a symbol of what humanity constantly does in keeping God away from us. I couldn't see Bethlehem because of a wall. I couldn't get there. And we have done that from the very beginning in our relationship with God. We've kind of created walls that keep God away from us. So I'm sure God over the years kept trying to figure out how to do this, because we human beings kept avoiding God. God would send messengers, God would try to give us some direction, and we'd, nope, we can do it on our own, God, thank you. We got it, just like me with that guy, I got it. I can do this, I know my way. We've done that with God. So finally, God decides that maybe there is a way that God could get around the wall, that God could touch our hearts, and that maybe finally we wouldn't put up walls anymore. Greg Boyle, who's a Jesuit who does work with gang members in LA, has been very successfully doing that for many years now, for probably almost 40 years. His third book, I finished the other day, and there's a whole section in there where he argues, because they keep saying, well, why are you successful? How do you do this? How do you get the guys out of the gang? And one of the things he says is, it's just like in real estate, it's location, location, location. It's because they get close, because they're in the vicinity. They're willing to be side by side with these gang members. And that way the gang members begin to trust them. They know that it's going to be okay. This is a guy who's going to be there for them no matter what. So God, thinking the same thing, decides to take on our human flesh so that we wouldn't be so far away from God. And even in doing that, I'm not sure what kind of discussion was going on up in heaven, but God's trying to sneak in the form of a baby, and the angels must have got together and said, let's go down. Let's tell him about it. And God's probably there saying, no, just stop. Because you know what happens with the shepherds? The angels appear, and what happens to the shepherds? They're very much afraid. Oh yeah, that's the normal thing when angels appear, is people are very much afraid. The only one who wasn't was Mary, and even with her, the angel, first thing he says is, don't be afraid. Because that's what happens when God, in God's godness, tries to talk to us. We're like the shepherds, very much afraid. Which is why God appears in the form of a baby, a little bitty baby. And one that the angel said was swaddled, so it couldn't even move its arms and legs. It was all swaddled up. Who of you are afraid of a baby? I asked the school kids this last week. None of them said they were afraid of babies, but they did kind of nod when I said, but you might be afraid of diapers. You know, changing diapers might be something to be afraid of. But nobody's afraid of a baby. In fact, people are reaching out to strangers to hold their baby. Let me hold the baby. Because there's something about that infant that deeply touches our hearts. So that's how God chooses to come to you, to me. in a way that's not scary, in a way that we don't have to be afraid, in a way that we can let God into our hearts. But how do we make sure we don't have a wall? Because maybe we're still putting up our own walls, saying, I don't know. Not sure if I trust letting God into my heart. It might transform me. Oh yeah, it will. That's what God does when you let God's love in. So the only way we can make sure we don't have a wall is to come to God in the midst of our brokenness, in the midst of our pain, in the midst of our emptiness. Just a couple of days ago, Pope Francis and all his kind of executives had a little day of prayer together, and Father Cantalamessa, who's been the preacher at the Vatican for years, finished his homily, his teaching with a little story. It's an ancient story. It's a story about everybody coming to give gifts to the baby. Mary and Joseph being there, receiving all these different gifts, which we'll celebrate at Epiphany. And one of the little shepherd boys didn't have a gift. And he felt so bad because everybody else brought Jesus a gift and he had none. And so when it was his turn in front, he didn't have anything, nothing in his hands. So Mary took Jesus and put Jesus in his hands. And Father Cantalamessa said, that's how we all have to come. Saying that even to the Pope. This is how we come to Jesus. Empty, broken, in need. Because that's the only way that the wall is gone and that we can hold him in our heart.